I woke up to a miracle today. Triggers fade as I find my way. No judgment to lead astray. In this peaceful state I'll stay.
Welcome back to A Course in Miracles in Practice. We are so glad you have joined us for today's reflection on the workbook lessons.
It's wonderful to be exploring these ideas with you again. Every day, we take one lesson and look at how its guidance can move from the page into our, let's face it, often chaotic everyday lives.
It's about grounding the metaphysics, making it practical in our relationships, our work, everything.
Taking these big concepts and seeing them play out moment to moment.
Today's lesson is number 280. It's a significant one. What limits can I lay upon God's Son? This one asks for a look at our whole way of seeing.
Yes, how the ego is constantly trying to measure, categorize, and ultimately, box people in, including ourselves.
And we'll contrast that desperate need to define with the Course's truth about our limitless nature.
Because truly, every single feeling of anxiety or not being enough or any conflict, it all stems from believing limitation is real, whether it's limits others put on us or the ones we put on ourselves.
So the mission today is to see clearly how our attempts to restrict the limitless are always, without any exception, based in illusion.
And we absolutely invite you to share how this lands for you. Your reflections, any questions, maybe stories of how you see this in your own life. You can email us, that's ACIM@theworldharmonyproject.org.
Or find us over on TikTok. The handle is @theworldharmonyproject. Okay, so to begin this reflection, we have to start with the lesson itself. Let's read lesson 280. What limits can I lay upon God's Son? Who God created limitless is free. I can invent imprisonment for him, but only in illusions, not in truth. No thought of God has left its Father's mind. No thought of God is limited at all. No thought of God but is forever pure. Can I lay limits on the Son of God, whose Father willed that he be limitless and like himself in freedom and in love?
Today let me give honor to your Son, for thus alone I find the way to you. Father, I lay no limits on the Son you love and you created limitless. The honor that I give to him is yours, and what is yours belongs to me as well.
That first sentence, whom God created limitless, is free. It's stated so definitively. There's immense weight in that.
It's absolute. When the Course makes a statement like that, it doesn't come with conditions or exceptions based on how someone behaves or what their circumstances look like.
Right. It establishes limitlessness and freedom, not as goals to reach, but as our inherent status. How we were made. It's literally the substance of our being.
Which forces us to look at how illogical our usual thinking is. If God is infinite and we are extensions of that infinite source, then our own being must be infinite too. It follows logically. The implication is huge. The entire idea of limitation must be imaginary. Something invented, like the lesson says. I can invent imprisonment, but only in illusions, not in truth.
It's a massive challenge intellectually, isn't it? Because the ego's whole game depends on setting up boundaries and definitions. Smart, slow, success, failure, worthy, unworthy, all these categories. But if our nature is absolute freedom, then the ego's entire map of the world, our judgments, our hierarchies, our fears, it has to be fictional.
This lesson asks us to go beyond simply trying to be more tolerant or overlook mistakes. It asks us to question the very idea that we were ever capable of defining or confining another person accurately in the first place.
That is the core of the Course's idea of forgiveness, isn't it?
It is. It's not about ignoring what seems to happen on the surface, but about recognizing the absolute reality of limitlessness underneath all appearances. This lesson dismantles the belief that our judgments, no matter how strong they feel, could ever truly describe another being.
Okay, so staying with that idea of making it practical, how these truths show up day to day, I can share something from when I was a supervisor. It definitely relates to judging someone externally, trying to define their potential. I remember the specific new hire. He was young, incredibly enthusiastic, very communicative, always jumping in with ideas. But sometimes in our formal meetings, it felt impulsive. like he was interrupting the established flow with rapid-fire suggestions.
And in a structured corporate place, that kind of energy can sometimes be quickly labeled, maybe seen as a lack of discipline or a threat to the usual order.
That's exactly what happened inside my head. My internal snap judgment was quite strong. I immediately tagged him. Attention-seeking, unfocused, maybe too impulsive to handle serious responsibility.
Ah, the labels.
And it wasn't a fleeting thought. It became the filter. The irritation I felt, I disguised it even to myself as professional discipline or necessary discernment. But looking back, it was my own fear. Fear of things feeling out of control, projecting onto his energy.
It's fascinating how the ego does that, dresses up its limiting mechanisms as virtues. Fear gets called discernment, control becomes professionalism, judgment poses as realism.
Yes. And for several months, this judgment completely shaped how I managed him. I gave him the routine tasks, the necessary stuff, but I systematically kept him away from the more complex, higher-profile projects.
The kind of projects where people get to show initiative and grow?
The very ones. The assignments I typically use to mentor people, to help them stretch towards bigger roles. So by limiting his assignments based on my judgment, I was quite literally inventing an imprisonment for him within the structure I had some control over.
Projecting limits onto him, onto God's Son, and then acting as if those limits were objective facts about him.
And this holding back, this professional limiting, it could easily become a self-fulfilling thing, couldn't it? If you treat someone as limited, they might start acting that way, which then seems to confirm the initial mistaken judgment.
It creates an artificial ceiling based on your own discomfort, not their actual potential.
It felt initially safer to me. Holding on to that judgment seemed easier than risking failure on a visible project. But the feeling of carrying that separation, that judgment, it got heavier over time. I knew, deep down, I wasn't managing him well or fairly.
That inner friction can be a signpost.
Definitely. So finally, after weeks of this inner conflict, I asked him out for coffee, away from the office. I decided to approach it not as a character flaw in him, but as a communication gap I needed to understand better.
That shift, withdrawing the judgment and bringing in genuine curiosity instead, that's the first practical step towards honoring the limitlessness the lesson talks about.
And during that coffee, the whole picture just dissolved. He told me he'd only ever worked in highly collaborative startups before, places where that high-energy communication, the immediate brainstorming was the norm. It was expected.
So his frame of reference was completely different.
Completely.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to show off or disrupt meetings. He was genuinely trying to connect, to show his enthusiasm and commitment. Using the communication style he thought was valued. He was bringing his full creative self, and I was seeing it through my own filter of scarcity and fear.
What's striking there is the insight didn't come because his behavior changed. He was still the same enthusiastic person. Your perception shifted.
Yes. The moment I understood that difference, I felt this incredible sense of relief wash over me. It was the release from needing to maintain that wall of judgment. I realized the realism. I thought I was defending this idea that people have to fit into narrow boxes to succeed. That was the illusion. True realism, course-style realism, means recognizing inherent capability. It always expands potential, never confines it.
So what happened then?
I immediately assigned him that complex cross-departmental project I'd been hesitant about. And he thrived. He succeeded brilliantly, grew into a highly valued team member, and eventually started mentoring others himself. The breakthrough was simply my removing the limits I had mistakenly put there.
That's a clear example of external constraints, the limits we put on others. But the lesson applies just as much to the internal constraints, the limits we impose on ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. Those can be harder to spot sometimes.
I can relate to that quite deeply from my own career path before I started working independently. In a previous high-level job, I was utterly convinced I didn't have the fundamental qualifications. It went beyond typical imposter feelings. It felt like a core, foundational belief in my own inadequacy.
That sounds like the ego defining you by the gap it perceives, the gap between where you are and some ideal standard. That belief that we have to somehow earn our worth, earn our belonging through exceptional performance.
It was exactly that. My supervisor at the time, a very thoughtful person, repeatedly told me I was capable, affirmed my potential, but I couldn't internalize it. I heard her words as kindness, maybe encouragement, but not as truth.
So how did that belief manifest? How did you react?
My reaction to that internal panic was to try and compensate through sheer effort, trying to close that perceived gap by force of will. I'd stay up late almost every night, buried in complex industry manuals, memorizing technical jargon. I was desperate to master everything before I felt found out.
That sounds incredibly exhausting. It's a common trap, isn't it? Confusing that fear-driven effort with genuine dedication, the inner critic disguised as a demanding work ethic.
It was pure fear-based constraint. And the paradox was the anxiety itself was hindering my learning. My mind was so busy trying to prove my basic worth, which felt tied to hitting those external marks, that I wasn't fully present to just observe, absorb, and grow in a natural way.
You were fighting your own learning process.
Yes. The struggle wasn't really about my competence level. It was completely about the ego's belief that my essential reality was limited and therefore needed constant stressful defense and upkeep.
So what was the turning point? How did you start to withdraw your belief in those internal limits?
It wasn't one single moment, more like a gradual shift combined with a key insight. The insight came when I was preparing for a big presentation. I felt that familiar wave of panic starting to rise, the physical symptoms, the racing thoughts. But instead of doing the usual thing, trying to push it down or fight it, I just paused. And I had this realization. The panic, the adrenaline, the fear, they were happening in my body, but they weren't me. I wasn't the fear itself.
Okay.
So I consciously made this internal statement, something like, I can feel nervous without being the nervousness.
That small internal shift, refusing to identify as the limitation. That's the course in action right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like an internal nod to this lesson. I am limitless. Therefore, my current feeling, my current sense of inadequacy cannot define the whole of who I am.
It's an internal way of saying, what limits can I lay upon God's Son? None. That shift didn't magically make the nerves vanish right away, but it broke the feedback loop. The nervousness became sensation, not a verdict on my worth.
And that created space.
It created space for natural confidence to emerge, space for actual learning to happen. And that space is the freedom this lesson is pointing us toward.
These personal experiences, both the external and internal limiting, bring us right back to that profound theological statement in Lesson 280. No thought of God has left its Father's mind.
Yes. When the Course talks about God's thoughts, with a capital T, it's not talking about our fleeting personal ideas. It refers to the extensions of God's own being, boundless, perfect, eternal. And we, as the Son of God, are among those thoughts.
It acts almost like a metaphysical guarantee of our permanence or safety.
Exactly. Since a thought of God is inherently perfect and pure, and since we haven't left the mind that created us, our purity, our limitlessness, our connection, it all remains absolutely intact, untouched by anything that seems to happen in the world of form or behavior.
It completely undermines the ego's core ideas of sin, separation, and lack. When we treat ourselves or anyone else as fundamentally lacking or flawed or needing fixing, we're essentially pretending.
Pretending that a perfect, eternal extension of God could somehow lose its essence, lose its connection, lose its purity. We're trying to impose finiteness onto the infinite.
Which is logically absurd.
Utterly. And that pretense, that foundational impossibility, is what the entire world of judgment and conflict is built upon. Every painful hierarchy we see or create, professional, social, economic, even within families, it all rests on that single false assumption that something real, something created by the boundless, could somehow step outside of that boundlessness.
How can you lay limits on something whose very definition is limitless? It just doesn't compute.
Which brings us back to how this reframes forgiveness in the Course. It's not about reluctantly pardoning someone for a real wrongdoing.
Right. It's not letting them off the hook.
No, it's an act of withdrawing our belief entirely from the ego's distorted picture of that person, a picture that was never true to begin with. We aren't excusing confusing or difficult behavior on the surface. We're refusing to let that temporary behavior define the eternal reality of who they are.
That's a crucial distinction for daily practice. The world's version of forgiveness often sounds like, okay, you messed up, that error was real, but I'll try to overlook it.
There's still a belief in the error.
Whereas A Course of Forgiveness says something more like, you remain exactly as God created you. What I thought I saw the mistake, my judgment about it, that illusion cannot touch the reality of your limitlessness. It's a perception based on permanence, not unconditional acceptance.
It shifts the entire goal, not correcting flaws, but recognizing the perfection that's already there, obscured perhaps, but never lost.
And that's why the prayer and the lesson feel so intimate and directly relevant to our relationships. The honor that I give to him is yours. When I honor another person's inherent freedom, when I refuse to define my coworker by his communication style or someone else by a perceived fault, I'm not doing some difficult spiritual heavy lifting.
No, you're simply aligning with truth. And that alignment itself brings the relief, the peace.
It connects spirituality directly to how we interact with each other. The journey of remembering our own limitlessness doesn't happen only in quiet meditation, does it?
Not primarily. It happens in every interaction, every time we choose how we're going to perceive the person in front of us. Every encounter, co-worker, family member, stranger on the street becomes a mirror reflecting back the question. Will you honor the limitless being here, or will you reinforce the illusion of boundaries and definitions?
And the practice itself can be gentle. We don't have to leap to perfect vision overnight.
Not at all. The beginning of freedom is often simply noticing. Noticing that automatic reflex to consign others, that quick mental sorting into categories. Difficult, reliable, risky, helpful.
Just seeing that mechanism whirring away inside.
Yes. And when you notice it, when you feel that mental machinery starting to grind out a judgment, using the lesson's idea as a quiet interruption, whom God created limitless is free, can stop the process right there.
That interruption is so important, especially for breaking down the competitive mindset that's so ingrained in our culture.
It really is. When you genuinely allow yourself to grasp, even for a second, that everyone's essential nature is the same magnitude of love, identical to God's love, shared by all, then competition starts to seem illogical.
Because there's no scarcity of value.
There's no scarcity. There's no need to stand out or be better than, because nothing real, nothing truly valuable is limited or scarce. Everything essential is shared infinitely and equally.
It completely turns the usual script upside down. The world tells us worth comes from achievement, from being exceptional in comparison to others.
But the Course says your exceptionalism is your inherent shared limitlessness. It's not about climbing a ladder. It's about looking past all the costumes of hierarchy, past the differing styles, past the strongly held opinions, and seeing the same limitless light shining equally through everyone.
Once you get even a glimpse of that shared reality, that oneness, it becomes harder to take the world's limits quite so seriously.
You might still get pulled back into stressful situations or moments of personal doubt, but that seed of awareness has been planted. You start to recognize that all these boundaries we fret about, success metrics, internal narratives of inadequacy, even the pressure of linear time, they're all part of the same story. A gentle fiction, perhaps.
I like that phrase, gentle fiction. The Course isn't scolding us for believing in limits. It's gently inviting us to stop putting so much energy into defending them.
Think about the immense mental and emotional effort we spend worrying about performance, protecting our image, reacting to judgments from others or ourselves. It's exhausting.
It almost becomes humorous when you see it clearly. All that energy spent guarding the imaginary walls of a cage we built ourselves, worrying about limitations we invented, while the door was never actually locked.
It comes down to that core truth. You are fundamentally incapable of confining what God created limitless. You can only imagine that you did. And that imagination, although it can feel heavy and stressful, is fiction. It has no real foundation. It cannot alter the truth of who you are.
So in practice, honoring God's Son means treating every single person, and this is key, including ourselves, as if they are already free, already whole, already limitless.
Yes. We stop trying to make them or ourselves become free through striving, achieving, or fixing. We simply choose to see the freedom that is already inherent.
And that shift in perception changes everything about our interactions.
It does. Instead of meeting people as problems to solve or sources of irritation to manage or projects to fix, we start meeting them as sacred reminders. Reminders of the exact same limitless truth we're trying to remember in ourselves. It removes the entire impulse to judge, change, or control.
That shift is exactly what I felt after that conversation with my coworker. It went beyond being a better manager. It felt like a glimpse of his innocence. I saw his high energy not as a professional flaw, as my ego had insisted, but as an unfiltered expression of the same life, the same spirit that animates everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The moment I stopped defining him by the rigid corporate limits I had accepted, his potential unfolded naturally.
The Course might call that recognition the beginning of true vision, or Christ vision, seeing not based on perfect external behavior, but recognizing the holiness, the permanence of his nature beneath all the temporary, sometimes stressful appearances of the world.
It is quite something, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we constantly think freedom is something to be earned or achieved through struggle, when it's actually our natural eternal state.
Lesson 280, like so much of the workbook, keeps circling back to that fundamental truth. God's Son is as free as God. That is the definition of creation.
So maybe the most useful practice for us today isn't trying hard to become limitless because we already are.
Right, that's impossible effort.
The practice is more about that gentle vigilance. Noticing every single time the mind whispers a limitation. Not enough. Not yet. Not qualified. Not like them. Not worthy. Every quiet refusal to buy into limitation, whether directed at someone else or ourselves, is an immediate yes to God's boundless reality. It's a moment of aligning with truth.
And that alignment always brings a sense of internal relief, doesn't it? A release of tension.
It does. Okay, perhaps we can make that application very concrete right now. For you listening, when that subtle judgment pops up, maybe about a choice you made yesterday, or about someone you're interacting with right now, we can choose to use the lesson directly. Use a structured way to shift perception.
This step-by-step approach can help intercept the ego's whisper of limitation before it really digs in and creates that familiar tension.
Okay, so step one is simply to pause. Pause and notice what's happening inside in that immediate moment. Just identify the first flicker of tension or judgment or anxiety rising in your body or your mind. Don't analyze it yet. Don't try to fix it. Simply notice it's there.
Step 2. Gently repeat the lesson's core idea internally. Silently say, "What limits can I lay upon God's Son?" Use that specific question as your tool. It shifts your focus away from the perceived problem and points it towards the ultimate reality.
Step 3 involves acknowledging your current state honestly. Acknowledge how you feel. Maybe anxious, maybe irritated, maybe confined, without judging the feeling itself as good or bad, right or wrong. Simply note its presence and admit, okay, right now I am believing in this illusion of limitation.
Step 4 is about actively inviting help from beyond the ego. Ask for the help needed to see differently. A simple internal request to the Holy Spirit works perfectly, asking to see the holiness, the innocence, beneath the stressful appearances you're currently focused on.
And step 5 is vital. Rest a moment. Give yourself a brief pause, maybe just a breath or two, to rest in the quiet awareness that the whole story of limits, inadequacy, and fear has absolutely no foundation in what's actually real. Rest in your inherent limitless nature.
That sequence can be returned to any time that feeling of limitation arises during the day.
Thank you for exploring Lesson 280. What limits can I lay upon God's Son with us today? It's a lesson that truly touches every single relationship we have.
It holds tremendous implications for how we navigate our lives, our work, and our connections with everyone around us.
And remember, every single time you make that choice, the choice to see someone as free instead of confined by your personal judgment, you are, in that same instant, remembering your own inherent eternal freedom.